For anybody who thinks that learning English has to be difficult, we're going to prove that wrong today. In about 4 or 5 minutes, we're going to learn everything we need to know about one area of English, and we're not going to use interactive whiteboards, computers, or any technology at all. We're going to use something called a notebook. If that's a bit boring for anybody who's under the age of about 30, if it helps, you can call it an iNotebook. Okay? So today we're going to look at something called the passive. So let's open it up and have a look. The passive voice seems like a simple area of English, but there's quite a lot we actually need to know to do this properly and learn how to use it, when to use it, construction, so on, and some exceptions too. First thing we need to know to learn the passive is what on earth that means, and the best way to do that is to learn what an active sentence is. English is not a very flexible language like some others. We tend to have a very set sentence structure. A normal sentence, an active sentence, will be like this: SVOPT, which means subject first, verb, object, place, time. Subject is the main thing in the sentence we're talking about. The verb is a doing word, as my teachers used to tell me at school. Object is the secondary thing in the sentence, and then place and time pretty obvious. So a simple sentence in an active voice would be: the cat chases the mouse in the garden every day. We're going to get rid of the place and time. They're not really important for what we're looking at, but as I say, they're not very flexible in English. So we're just going to look at these 3 bits. Subject, verb, object is an active sentence. To make a passive sentence, we're just going to switch that around. Object, verb, subject. The way we do this is by putting the mouse before the cat and saying the mouse is chased by the cat. Seems pretty simple, huh? And to do this, the construction is the object, in our case the mouse, is going to start the sentence, and to make this verb form we're going to put the verb to be followed by the 3rd form of the verb we're using. So in our sentence it was chase. Now chase is a regular verb, so we make the 3rd form of that verb chase, chased, chased. If it's kill, for example, another regular verb, it's an ed ending. Kill, killed, killed, 3rd form is killed. If we're using an irregular verb, such as sell, sold, sold, will be the 3rd form. Eat, ate, eaten. So, for example, the mouse was eaten by the cat. The cat's not necessary, but if we want to say it as an agent, then we use by. For example, the picture was painted by Van Gogh in, I got no idea when Van Gogh lived, but let's say 1872. Or you can just say the picture was painted in 1872. Apologies to Van Gogh, I have no idea about you. Now using to be is the difficult part of this. What we're doing is we're choosing the time when something happened. So we'll look at one verb, cook for example. So to use the passive of cook, if we're using it in the present simple, which is the first example here, to say something happened every day, dinner is cooked at 8 o'clock. Yesterday dinner was cooked at 8 o'clock. Right now dinner is being cooked. Dinner will be cooked later. Dinner has been cooked. And we need to remember that with the verb to be, we change have been or has been for plural and singular, is being for singular, are being for plural, depending on whether there's 1 or 2 objects that we're talking about. Good question now. Why? Why do we use it? There's a few different reasons we use the passive. In a lot of languages they don't use it so much. In English it's quite common. We'll use it when the object is more important than the subject. For example, man or dog. You'd say the postman was bitten by the dog, rather than the dog bit the postman, because the postman's more important here than the dog. The subject is unknown. For example, the bridge was built in 1950. We don't really know who built it, and also we don't care. It's just some bridge builder. It's some guy If the subject's obvious from the verb, that means verbs like arrest, try in a court, for example, sentence again in a court. Only the police really arrest people. So you'd say the criminal was arrested yesterday. Because saying police arrested the criminal, it's not necessary. The man was sentenced to 20 years in prison, because we know that only a judge can do that verb, so it's quite obvious who the subject is. In formal writing, in letters we tend to do this. If you'd say the package was delivered yesterday, because we don't want to say a courier did it, we're not interested in him. Sorry if you're a courier, but you know, that's the way it is. Also, it's a good denial of responsibility. You say it is being done, rather than saying who's doing it. Okay, and the last one here is headlines and things. In newspapers you'll say 10 killed in explosion, because the 10 people are more important, and it's a shorter way of writing the sentence. And lastly, to avoid saying somebody, everybody, people, these very vague terms, if something's general, everybody thinks it. Kurt Vonnegut is thought to be a great writer. Rather than saying people think that Kurt Vonnegut is a great writer, because Vonnegut is the important thing. I think that should be was. He died a few years ago, so that would be better in the past. No, let's keep it in the present, because people still think it. So, he is thought to be a great writer. It is believed that a cure for cancer will be found, because we don't want to say people believe that scientists will find a cure for cancer. There's two examples of the passive in that sentence. Sometimes we don't need to write the whole of the passive construction with the be, for example. Look at this as a relative clause. Relative clause is an additional part, or a non-defining relative clause is an additional part of a sentence we add in. So for example, the book, which was written in the 1950s, tells the story of a young man from Ohio. Now, a whole sentence would be the book tells the story of a young man from Ohio. We've added in some information there that the book was written in the 1950s. Now, because this isn't a relative clause, we don't actually need to use was written, which was. We can say the book, written in the 1950s, tells the story of a young man from Ohio. Now, people learn to speak English correctly when they're foreigners. That doesn't mean that English people or American people or native speakers actually do the same. We're very lazy. One example of this is in the passive. We use got instead of be. It's a kind of colloquial slang expression. So you'll say, my car got nicked. My team got thumped. My house got robbed. Okay? English people will say it. To be honest, if you want to speak English well, understand what they're saying, but don't do it yourself. There's certain examples where we don't want to use the passive as well. It's really impossible. There's no passive when we use to be. I'm trying to think of a sentence that makes any sense there. It doesn't work at all. He is hungry. You can't say he is been hungry. Hungry is been by him. It makes no sense whatsoever. Have, for possession, for example. I have a pen. Not the pen is had by me. It's owned by me, it's possessed by me, but it's not had by me. You can use have if you said a good time is being had by all, but that's not about possession. It's about the action of having a good time. Okay, modal verbs. Modal verbs are verbs like should, can, could, might, would, ought to, had better. We can't use any kind of passive voice in this. You can't say, I was musted to do it because my mother told me to. I had to do it. Okay? If you want to use have to, you can say I was made to do it, because made is not a modal verb. Okay. And let is another good example here. We use allowed instead of let in this case. Dare is sometimes a modal verb, but I was dared to do it by my friends is an exception where we actually use the passive voice, not only the active, etc., etc. There are more examples. Okay? And next is nothing, because that's all we need to know.